All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's Strength and Power. So I wanted to make a video about Tony Pearson, the legendary classic bodybuilder that's also known as the Michael Jackson of bodybuilding. Now, number one, they call him that one because he looks like Michael Jackson, and number two, he had magnificent posing, and he moved in a way that almost looked like Michael Jackson would move on stage. So he was a very, very talented poser, and that's one of the things he was known for. So this guy is an iconic bodybuilder that had a career in bodybuilding that spanned from 1976 all the way until 1994. So this guy had a 3-decade career in bodybuilding. He started as a teenager and just had a very, very vast career. And of course, this video is kind of a continuation on my NABBA Mr. Universe Winners series. You guys seem to be enjoying those videos. Again, for those of you who don't know, the NABBA Mr. Universe was a competition that was held prior to the Mr. Olympia. So it had 15 years of history before the Mr. Olympia ever started. And at that point in time, the 50s and 60s, the Mr. Universe was the #1 title in bodybuilding and not the Mr. Olympia title. So that's why I'm doing a series on past NABBA Mr. Universe winners, because I think there are some universe winners out there who are just as good, if not better than, some of the past Mr. Olympia winners. So I think they deserve their own spotlight and their own videos, just like Tony Pearson is getting right now. So Tony Pearson was 5'8" or 172.5 centimeters tall, and his weight was between 205 and 215 pounds on stage, or 88.5 to 93 kilograms. So not a very heavy bodybuilder by any means at all. So as I mentioned before, his career started in 1976, and that was at the AAU Gold's Gym Classic, and he was a teenager, and then he won the overall at that show. In 1978, he would win the AAU Mr. America. And that's another reason why I wanted to make a video about this guy. Is not only has he won the NABBA Mr. Universe, but he's won several other major titles in bodybuilding, and he's placed very well at several major shows. So he's definitely worthy of a video when you've won the Mr. America and the Mr. Universe. And there's several other competitions in between there that he's won as well, and I'm going to get those in a minute. So he also won the 1978 Junior Mr. USA, the 1979 WBBG Olympus. He won the overall at that show. The WBBG Pro World in 1979. He won the overall at that show as well. In 1979, the WABBA World Championships, he won the overall at that as well. And that is the organization that was started by Serge Nubret. If you guys are familiar with Pumping Iron, he is the black guy from Pumping Iron that placed second to Arnold at the 1975 Mr. Olympia. So Serge Nubret started this bodybuilding competition, or this bodybuilding federation, WABBA, and this is the competition that holds the world championships. And that's basically like their Mr. Olympia or their Mr. Universe, any title you want to give it. That was their big Super Bowl show. So then in 1980, Tony would win his NABBA Mr. Universe title. So definitely the late 70s and early 80s, those were definitely the dominant years of Tony Pearson's career. So when you're thinking back of Tony Pearson, a lot of these pictures that you're probably looking at are from that time frame, late 70s, early 80s, when he was really hitting his stride and really in his prime, and his physique was really looking probably the craziest that it looked. So some of the things that stand out to me, really just his small waist, his conditioning, and his posing, like I mentioned before. I mean, his conditioning was just nuts. This guy looked insane in some of these pictures, like, especially for that time period. Conditioning was key back then, but this guy was just majorly conditioned. I mean, these pictures, to me, they just look incredible. So in 1981, Tony would begin his career with the IFBB. So he started with the IFBB, and he competed in a lot of IFBB shows, but he just wasn't very successful in them in terms of winning. So he placed a lot of top 5s, a lot of top 6s. He placed 3rd at the IFBB World Pro Champions. He won the IFBB Grand Prix Denver in 1983. He had a 2nd place at the 1983 Grand Prix Portland. So in terms of competing in the IFBB, he never really was too successful in any major shows like the Olympia or the Arnold Classic, which wasn't really around at that time until the late 80s. And he was still competing in the late 80s, but he never had any success at the Arnold as well. So in terms of the Olympia placings, he placed 12th in 1984. Then again in 1985, he would place 12th at that year's Olympia as well. And then he would continue to compete in a lot of these smaller Grand Prix shows all over the world throughout the late 80s and the duration of the 80s, really. Then in 1990, he did compete in the Arnold Classic. So this was only the 2nd year that the Arnold Classic was ever held. And he placed 6th at that year's Arnold Classic. So an important thing to remember about the 1990 Arnold Classic was that this was the year the Arnold Classic was drug tested. This was the same year that Sean Ray was stripped of his title. So Sean Ray won that year. He was later stripped of his title after failing a drug test, and then Mike Ashley what became the winner. So I wonder if that means that Tony Pearson would have moved up to 5th place if the winner was disqualified. So does everybody move up a place then? So really maybe a 5th place finish at the 1990 Arnold Classic, which is not too shabby. And then the following year, in 1991, Tony Pearson would actually go over to Vince McMahon's WBF, or World Bodybuilding Federation. And for those of you who have seen my video, this is the year that Vince McMahon tried to start his own, rival organization to the IFBB. And it failed miserably, but Tony Pearson did go over there, and he placed 11th in the WBF Grand Prix. He would continue to compete in the IFBB as a pro throughout the early 90s. Then he would kind of go on a hiatus from IFBB competition. Then in 2014, he would actually come back and compete in the NABBA USA Grand Masters, and he would win that. So technically, Tony retired in the 90s, but he has competed in several smaller shows, kind of to prove that he can compete in his 50s. I think he's 60 years old right now. Yeah, he's 60. So throughout his 50s, he definitely tried to come back and compete in a lot of shows recently. I think he also did a show on Muscle Beach. You know how they have that Muscle Beach outside workout area, and sometimes they hold small bodybuilding competitions there. I think he did one of those competitions as well, and just some smaller stuff like that. So really no pro bodybuilding as of recently, but he does jump in some of those bodybuilding competitions just to prove that he's still got it. So some of these photos you're looking at right now are from him in his 50s, looking pretty damn good for a man in his 50s. So that's the video, guys, on Tony Pearson. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please give the video a thumbs up if you want to see more videos like this about past NABBA Mr. Universe winners. Thank you guys for watching. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.